Okay, so welcome to this afternoon's live stream. Hopefully everything is sounding okay and looking all right. And here this afternoon to talk a little bit about the Fingerstyle 5 membership and how what we do and how that works in conjunction with the kinds of things I was talking about in this week's lessons. And then also we'll take some questions as well. So, for instance, I just played a version of St. James Infirmary, and taking it through the paces that you might take an 8-bar blues, an instrumental tune, to develop it out. So you can hear there's things like an intro, then there's a version of the melody. And then some improvising. And then some elements of the shout chorus, like something to kind of give the tune its climax, with these kinds of voicing. And that sort of thing. Then pulling it back, coming back to a vamp, doing some more improvising. All the kinds of stuff I was talking about in the lesson series I did this week. If you missed that series, or you missed one of them, the link for that is fretboardconfidential.com/improvisation. And there's 3 lessons there on improvisation, on groove, and on arranging. And they all kind of fit together. I took one tune and went through all of that. So if you want to see the process kind of gone through in depth, you can go to that series and check it out. Today, I'm going to walk through a little bit of how that sort of idea plays out in the membership. And so I'll maybe talk a bit about how it would apply to certain tunes. So let me get started. And I know I see some folks in the chat who are already in the membership, so that's nice to see. Hello, everybody. Guido and Mike and Wayne and Henriette. Great to have you here. So if you've got questions from people that are actually in the membership already, you can post them in the chat, and they can probably tell you as much about it as I can, because some of them have been here for quite some time. So as you can tell from, if you watch some of those lessons, the real question is, I've been teaching for a long time, and writing, in books and in magazines and in videos, and in person in workshops, and really, like, it all comes down to the one basic question of, like, what if you could play like you want to, right? I mean, everybody's got an idea of, like, well, I'm doing this, but this is what I really want to be doing. It's like that old joke about, like, what kind of roles you're interested in doing in the theater? Well, I'd really like to produce. It's like, I'm playing like this, but what I really want to be able to do is this. And that never goes away. I can think of like a half a dozen things right now that I'm working on, or wishing I could do, or thinking about how to get better at. So I feel like any kind of teaching that you sign up for is really looking for the answer to that question. Like, is this going to help me play like I want to play? And the things that, just from the kinds of teaching I do and the kinds of things I talk about, the things that I found I was getting asked about the most were, because I play and teach a lot of fingerstyle guitar, and I had a lot of lessons about this already on YouTube, and I had these lessons out through TrueFire and these other places, Homespun, these other outlets, that I would get people that would find me and they would say, well, one of two things. Either, how do I get my right hand coordination together, right? How do I get my thumb and my fingers to do what they're supposed to? That was one big one. And then the other one was, how do I make the songs I already know more interesting? And so from all of that, that all seemed to kind of fit together to me. And because really what those questions are all sort of part of asking, not just sort of how do I play like I want to, but how do I play the songs that I want to play? So really, it's ultimately a question about repertoire. And so, I find whenever anybody asks me, what should I work on? My first question is, what do you want to be able to do? If you want to play the songs of Mississippi John Hurt, what you should do is really different than if you want to, improvise like B.B. King. Those are just two different things. And so you wouldn't practice the same things to get good at single note B.B. King style improvising that you would to get good at playing country blues in the style of Mississippi John Hurt. So at the end of the day, you got to be thinking, kind of reverse engineer the repertoire you want to play. So these questions that I was hearing about, how do I get my right hand to work together? How do I get my thumb and my fingers to work together? And how do I play the songs I want to play the way I want to play them? Sort of came together as this kind of thing of, well, if you're going to play this kind of music, if you want to play solo fingerstyle guitar, then you need to, these are the things you need to do with your right hand. And if you want to develop those songs into complete arrangements, then these are the things you need to know how to do as far as arranging and improvising and stuff like that goes. Because, and this kind of led me to just to really focus on, well, what are the important elements of playing fingerstyle blues? And the first one is groove, which is another way of just thinking about right hand coordination, right? Can you keep good time? Can you syncopate your fingers over the thumb? If you're playing just an alternating thumb tune, there's playing the tune in a really straightforward way. And there's syncopating it. Right? And that's two very different things. So even if you're not getting fancy and you're not syncopating things, it's really important to have a solid groove, to have a solid right hand or a solid picking hand, because even really simple things sound better when they're played with good time. If you have a good groove, you can play just C, G, and F, and it sounds really good. So groove is really important. And it's also the foundation for being able to do things like improvise, because improvisation is based on putting new things over a solid foundation. And when you play solo guitar, the thumb is always the foundation. It's the chord progression, it's the rhythm section. And so whether you're playing fixed tunes, like with a melody that's worked out, or whether you're learning to improvise, it's equally important in either avenue to be able to play good time and to have that kind of coordination, that kind of control over the syncopation. And the next piece of the puzzle is being able to improvise. Because if you want to take an 8-bar tune, like I opened with St. James Infirmary, that song is only 8 bars long. And if you don't sing, or if you're not singing that tune, then what do you do after 8 bars? Right? You got to do something. And if you're singing the song, then the verses are what carry the song forward. They tell the story. But in the absence of lyrics, you need a way to develop the song. You need a way to create, build, and momentum and a sense of narrative from that 8 bars. And so knowing some of the ways to do that is the next step once your time is good. And then finally, I kind of started talking at cross purposes. I was talking about arranging and about improvising. Let me get those clear. So improvising is one way to extend the tune by just creating, new stuff on the spot. But that's so reliant on the moment that being able to arrange is the third piece of the puzzle after groove and improvisation, because being able to arrange means you can work out where the song is going to go. You can leave space for improvisation, but you can also have this sort of greater structure over the whole thing. And the reason that arranging is so important is that it's one of the real key pieces to assuming some kind of creative control over your playing and over your repertoire. Because when you can take a tune and arrange it yourself, then you're free from having to find someone else's version on a record, having to find someone else's tab to do it. You can take any song that you can play 8 bars of, and you can turn it into a piece of repertoire, which means you can start creating your repertoire of the songs you want to play, and not be not have to rely on only playing things that you've received tab for. So to me, the ultimate goal of any teaching that I do is for you to basically get to the point where you're like, cool, I got it. I'm out of here. That would be great if you like your right hands, you're picking hands together, and your improvising is happening, and you're arranging, you can take these tunes and turn them into what you want to turn them into. That's what I want to see for anybody who comes walking in my metaphorical door, is to be able to walk back out with those things together so they can go and make a repertoire and, have a sound of their own. I think that's the ultimate goal. So the people who are in the membership, and y'all that are here can speak to this if you want in the chat, but the point is to be able to play the songs better, to be able to build on that repertoire, to be able to start improvising. So, and that's because my own sort of path through this process was to start off only knowing a handful of instrumental tunes, and not really knowing what to do with them once I'd played the song. I knew how to play Angie, and I knew how to play a bit of Deep River Blues, and I knew how to play the instrumental break to some Hot Tuna things. But it was like, okay, great. I'm not really a singer. What do I do with those? And so the next step was to go, well, can I solo? Because I knew how to solo on electric guitar, because that was my background as well as playing acoustic guitar. So I thought, well, the next logical thing to do would be to solo on those tunes. But then I realized, well, it's really easy to run out of steam and just feel like, you've played all the ideas you have. And so, the next step after that was to start to figure out some kind of structure to these tunes. And so I thought, well, every tune's got to have an intro and maybe a little outro, bookend it. And then if you play the melody once, maybe you play it a second time and you do something more interesting with it. And then beyond that, as I was learning to play guitar, I was also listening to a lot of swing and jazz and Western swing. And from that, I got the idea of, oh yeah, there's bigger and smaller amounts of the ensemble. You hear in those Benny Goodman records with Charlie Christian, which are just wonderful, or early Count Basie. They'll do this thing where everybody will get together at a certain point in the tune and play this big orchestrated thing together. And on the guitar, you can kind of approximate that with chords, right? So this thing I was playing before on St. James Infirmary of right? It's a big moment. And then you can drop back and improvise. So, instead of just saying, well, I'm going to solo for the whole 8 bars, you could do something like have this 4 bars of what those big band musicians call the shout chorus, because it sounds like everybody's shouting at once, right? It's everybody's playing. So you could have so 4 bars of improvising, right? Not a big wide open space, just 4 bars. And then you're back into right? So now the improvising is kind of corralled into this small space. So that seemed to me oh, that's manageable, right? That's I've got some structure, and then I've got some places to solo. And when I sort of worked out that scheme, I was like, oh, okay, this could kind of apply to a lot of tunes. And then when I started showing it to people, it seemed oh yeah, that's a little more manageable than just thinking you've got to make up everything on the spot, improvise for 3 minutes. That's a lot of improvising to do. So that was kind of the process of figuring out, and I've just compressed into 2 seconds, a long process of learning and figuring stuff out. So now being able to take an 8-bar blues and expand it into something, there's a way to kind of build a repertoire out of that. And what really helped, once I started explaining this, then I had to really break it down and make it systematic. Because, you know this, and I know this from because I've taken plenty of guitar lessons and music lessons too. You can go to someone who is doing something really cool and they can't explain it for beans, right? I mean, you sit down and you're so excited, like, oh yeah, show me that thing. And they're like, well, I guess kind of go like this. Like, I was working on a book. I never actually ended up finishing it, but I had this tentative plan to write this book about roots rhythm guitar. And I was like, this is great. And I'm going to talk to these Western swing guitar players about how they do, how they do that cool, I think it's Eldon Shamblin, all that stuff. And I was like, I can't wait to write the book because I'm going to get to interview people and learn how they do it. So I went to one really well-known Western swing musician, and I was like, okay, can you show me that Eldon Shamblin stuff? And I thought, this is a guy who's really well-known for playing this kind of music. And I thought, the keys to the kingdom were mine. He was just going to open it up, and my mind was going to get blown, and I was going to have all this cool stuff to put in the book. And he showed me a couple things, and he was like, yeah, that's kind of the whole deal. And I was like, no, it's not. He was like, yeah, he was like, there's really not. The rest is just kind of deep. That's just kind of it. And I was like, so disappointed. And then I was at a workshop watching Red Volkart, Telecaster genius, watching him just teach whatever. Like, everybody was just, because he can play all these different styles, and people were just peppering him with questions. And so I was like, I was not supposed to be in the workshop. I was just kind of watching because I was teaching somewhere else, but I had an hour off. So I went to crash this thing, and I was like, hey, Red, can you talk about Western swing? And that wasn't even what he came to talk about. And all I had was I literally had an envelope and a ballpoint, and I was taking notes. And in 10 minutes, he explained so much stuff, amazing teaching, right? So some people are just better at breaking stuff down than others. And having to explain stuff to other people, I had to go back and figure out what's really going on. And in the process of doing that, I had to take these three things, improvisation and arranging and groove, and really break it down into a set of step-by-step moves so that I could say to someone okay, first do this, and then do that, and then do this. And, try to put these pieces together. Because otherwise it's no good to just say you need good time. That doesn't help anybody, right? Because that, I know that, but how do you get good time? And so that whole lesson I posted this week on the horizontal 3-step was that's the breakdown. You take it apart. You do just the bass. You do just the melody. You make sure that you know where all the pinches are. You make sure you know what's syncopated and what's not. And you just know what's going on, and you do it slowly, and you do it with a metronome. And yes, it's a little bit tedious, but it's, it's what you do. It's the choice is yours. Once the steps are there, the choice is yours. You can do the steps or you can not do them. It's okay with me either way. But if you want to know how I think you might get better time for playing this kind of music, that's my suggestion. And I think it's important to have step-by-step clarity around these things, because that is the biggest frustration with learning music, right? Everybody is yeah, I would do what it takes to get better if I knew what I was supposed to be doing. Because that's, the other big question that I find coming at me as a teacher is, what should I practice and what should I work on? Kind of like I was saying before. And my answer is always what do you want to do? But that's what we're all looking for. I mean, I was trying to learn just for my own, improvement and my own purposes. I decided at one point I wanted to learn how to write harmony, 4-part harmony and counterpoint, classical theory. And the hardest part was finding the right way to learn it, the right book, the right teacher. You can find the world is awash in information, but finding the information that worked for me, that was the thing. So, this is just my take, and I am aware that my take on it is different from a lot of other places, because I do not come out of this diehard pre-war country blues perspective. I admire that music, and I have immense respect for the people who know it and play it. Paul Rochelle is a good friend of mine. I think that guy knows that music inside out. I think he also has an incredibly creative and musical approach to it. And Steve James, another guy, spent time hanging out with. He was my colleague at acoustic guitar. He knows that music inside out. He has done the homework. He has spent the time. And he also does not just, like Paul, the thing that Paul and Steve have in common, and really all the people that I've met who really play this kind of music and are really deep into it, Roy Bookbinder, they all have their own very individual and creative take on it. And I think that really gets lost in the shuffle, because when those guys show up to do a clinic, or they show up to make a video, or they show up to get interviewed in a magazine, people want to know, how did Gary Davis do it? Or they want to know, like, what's the secret to sounding like John Hurt? And those guys are smart, kind people, and so they oblige. But that's not really what even they're about. They're about taking that music and doing something imaginative and creative with it. And I've interviewed Roy and I've hung out with him. And when I've really pressed him on it, how important was it to you to play the music just like the guys who came before? He was like, that was not my thing. That was nobody's thing that I knew, he said. None of us in the folk scene really wanted to play exactly like those people. We wanted to do something with it. We wanted to make our own music. We wanted to be creative people. That was just the music we loved, and that was our starting point. And that's, for lack of the kind of grounding, those guys had the opportunity to spend time with those musicians from the 20s and 30s. I mean, Roy lived and hung out with Gary Davis. Steve James, made pilgrimages to go hang out with Furry Lewis. People like John Sebastian and Happy Traum. I spent a whole night one time listening to them talk about, like, going down to Mississippi. Well, Happy didn't, but John did. And John told the whole story of, like, tracking down and going and hanging out with Mississippi John Hurt, and those guys lived in an era when that was possible. I didn't. I mean, I had records, basically. And I didn't even have records of the old guys. I had records of the new guys. To me, I had records of Dave Van Ronk and Roy Bookbinder and all those people. So my thing has always been just to say, well, let's take this music and this repertoire, because it's awesome. I love those tunes. I love Baby Please Don't Go. And I love Sitting on Top of the World. And I love House of the Rising Sun. And I love all that stuff. And let's figure out what we can do with it. And so if you want to learn how to play, the music of Blind Blake note for note, then please, by all that is holy, go study with Tom Feldman. Go get a homespun lesson. Like, that's where to get that stuff. This is not the place to get that, for better or worse. It's something else. And, like, I'm okay with that. And, go find that stuff if that's what you want to do. But I do think that this approach of thinking about groove and improvisation and arranging has value. And here's a couple of things that people have said over the last few months that I got a kick out of. So one of my students wrote and said, I'm a longtime player from down in Australia. This series of videos has opened up a window I didn't know was there. The idea of firmly sticking to a place for a certain kind of lick and then practicing that has transformed my playing. So, like, looking at, like, this was after an improvisation lesson, like, just saying, like, stay in one spot, find the different possibilities, move them around, kind of like I did in the improvisation video on Monday. And this is actually my favorite quote at the moment. This was actually on my YouTube channel, but this guy wrote and said, in the world of YouTube guitar lessons, this series is a gem in a sea full of garbage. Thank you so much for this information. I don't know why that makes me laugh so much. So that's kind of what it's about. So let me just explain a little bit about what sort of the week to week is. And I see a boatload of comments here, and I don't really want to, I'll pause in a minute. I know I've kind of been talking to Blue Streak, but let me just, let me pause now and actually just, like, check the feed. And then I will go into a bit of a breakdown of, like, what happens week to week, month to month in the membership. Okay. So let's see. Oh, Dave H., it's your first year. You've been a year in the Fingerstyle 5. That's great. More folks here that are in it. Okay. From Joel. Hi from Seattle. I like your adding in the mid-range notes on one of your lessons I was looking at last night. Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, that's a big thing about, like, just sort of filling in. Like, you got the bass, you got the melody, adding in the, sixths and thirds to kind of fill in that middle area is a really important part of arranging. Gary Stevens, also at the 1 year mark. Awesome. From Lee Lewis, who was your main influence, or was it a collection of influences? Let me just hold that thought for a minute. I'd be happy to answer that. Let's see. From Marcus, great to listen to you explain stuff. Tuning in from Greece. Nice. Getting my head around your approach. Okay. From Dave H. Some nice words about the membership. Donald. Oh, Donald. Oh, so these guys, Dave H. and Donald, they're in the membership already. The horizontal 3-step will blow your mind. Thank you. Anton. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Anton. Anton's been here a long time. And Wayne. Okay, so lots of folks just kind of chiming in that are already here. Influences. So I always say that I'm a second-generation Gary Davis player, because the 4 guys that I listened to the most growing up were Jorma and that first Hot Tuna record, Stefan Grossman, Roy Bookbinder, and Dave Van Ronk. And the first 3 of those all studied with Gary Davis, and Dave Van Ronk hung out with Gary Davis. So I never had Gary Davis records as a kid because I couldn't find them. If it wasn't at the library, I didn't have it. And if I couldn't find it, at the record store in Harvard Square, then I didn't have it. So I had records of those 4 60s revival blues guitar players, and they're the ones who influenced me the most. And especially Stefan Grossman, because he wrote his own tunes and he wrote a lot of instrumentals. And so those first 2 records he made with John Renbourn, I listened to over and over and over again. And so I can still, like things like... Things like that were hugely influential to me. Just like things with walking bass lines, things that were bluesy but weren't the blues per se. And then I got a bunch of that Gary Davis stuff secondhand from the Jorma, from the Hot Tuna records. And then John Hurt. I mean, that was the one sort of authentic, pre-war guy that I could find albums of. And so all of that stuff. So all that alternating stuff. I didn't get it from Merle Travis like all the Chet guys do, because I couldn't find records of Merle Travis. I mean, I knew who everybody was, but I couldn't find albums of all of it. So I got it where I could. And so I got my alternating thumb stuff from John Hurt. And then from all the like folky and folk rock guys after that, like, Dylan and Paul Simon and all that stuff, and the Beatles, like all kinds of travels, or all kinds of kind of travels down through those people. But that's where all that stuff comes from for me. And then that merged with electric blues, with B.B. King and Gatemouth Brown and Albert Collins and T-Bone Walker, and then honky tonk and country guitar players, and just everything, all that stuff just kind of like, and jazz, Charlie Christian and Django and all that. So it comes from lots of places. If you can squeeze it onto the guitar, great. And that's, I think, where that improvising aesthetic comes from, right? Because I was listening to lots of improvised music, as well as fingerstyle, which is not really known for being an improviser's music. And Guy Van Duzer, that's the other huge, like, he was one of those guys I couldn't play what he did, but I loved it. Oh, and someone just mentioned Joseph Spence. Well, Ry Cooder also, So Ry Cooder and Guy Van Duzer, those are the guys who were a little more improvisational and like just really inspiring in terms of groove, especially groove and arrangement. Guy Van Duzer's arrangement of Duke Ellington's Black Beauty is one of my favorite things ever done on the guitar. And then all that Ry Cooder finger picking on albums like Into the Purple Valley and Paradise and Lunch. So let me just talk a little bit about the membership itself and how it works. So the premise of the membership is that roughly every month we take a new tune and we sort of give it the treatment, right? You get we start with what I call the fundamental version of it, which is just, a pretty straightforward reading of the tune. So like we did Sitting on Top of the World around this time last year. So the melody, just putting the melody over the bass. And that just frames the song, kind of. It tells you, like, what's the chord progression, what's the groove, how does the melody go. It gets it into your head. It's not too tricky, and it's fundamental. It's like, this is a basic reading of the song. And then the next thing will be an embellished version, which could be some chord substitutions. It could be taking the song up the neck. It could be filling in some of those inner voices with some thirds and sixths and chords. In the case of Sitting on Top of the World, we took it up the neck to here and added some chords for support. I haven't played this one in a while. And so taking up the neck, adding in some voicings, a couple of chord substitutions or bass moves, just to sort of dress it up a little bit. So at the beginning of a month, you would get both of those arrangements to work on, plus either that week or the next week, some exercises. So like if this is kind of a tricky move, like just things to get you up to speed, right? Because not everybody's played a lot of steady bass. But some people have, and they haven't played a lot of alternating thumb. So I always want to give some ways to work on this, right? So there might be just some things about, well, these are the voicings we need. And so if you haven't played those, it might be useful just to practice those over the steady bass. So that might be, just like the exercises are short. It's like a couple of bars each, and I'll try to do like 5 or 6 of them just to isolate the trouble spots. I always say it's like, if you picked up this tune and looked at it for the first time, I try to anticipate where you might get hung up. Like it's chord transitions, it's what is my right hand supposed to be doing? And so I'll try to create a few things to work on so that when you go back to the tune, you're like, oh, that thing, that's what we do with that. So right there, if you went through that 7-step arc lesson that I did in arranging yesterday, that's part of those 7 steps in building an arrangement, having a fundamental version, having an embellished version. Right there, you've got, 3/7 of an arrangement, right? Because at some point you're going to want to play the melody, an embellished version of the melody, and then come back to the melody. And so once you've done that, then a week or 2 after that, we'll do an improvisation lesson where I'll just talk about the different steps to the tune and the different corners that you might need to turn and give you some specific licks to work on. Right? So if we're in A and we're doing Sitting on Top of the World, then it might be like, well, there's the A blues scale you're going to want to use in this position, and maybe we'll have a few exercises, just a couple of cool licks. So instead of just practicing the scale, you practice a specific move. Now we're talking about syncopation, talking about articulations like slides and pull-offs. And so within that exercise or that lick, I might break down and go, okay, here's some things to remember about pull-offs. Here's some things to remember about when you're sliding more than once or you're sliding and then pulling off. Here's a couple ways to break that down. So I'm never just going like, here's a lick, isn't it cool? I'm saying, here's a lick. What do you got to do to execute this lick? If you're not ready to play it yet, here's a simpler version. Here's a way to use it. And then when you are playing the tune, this is where it would belong. And then finally, later in the month, I'll do a live stream like this, only just for the membership, right? So, and I'll take about an hour and I'll walk through the tune in terms of the arrangement. I'll say, okay, here's a couple ideas for an intro. Like if we're doing an intro in A, how would you do that? Like maybe you'd vamp. Okay, so what's going on with that? Why does that work? What are some other variations? Oh, we could do this kind of vamp. And I'm doing triplets and, so there's some ideas for an intro. Oh, we could, do a walk down. And why does that chord work there? And then we're in. And then we'll talk about I'll suggest, well, here's a couple ways to do the shout chorus. And now we've got all the pieces, right? Because we've talked about soloing, we've talked about a fundamental and an embellished arrangement. We've talked about an intro vamp, we've talked about a shout chorus. So now we can put those 7 steps together. In theory, we have gone from an 8-bar blues to like a complete tune, and you should be able to go through and do all of that. So that's basically the structure, but there's also some additional stuff. So the basic membership is $20 a month. Well, there is only one membership, so it is $20 a month. And so what that includes, besides like the month's material, is everything that we've done so far for the last 18 months is also archived. So some months I don't do a new tune because, like this current month, every few months or at most every 5 months, we'll take a month off from new material because everybody, I sort of thought originally, everybody's going to want a new song every month. And then we got into it and I started getting posts on the forum saying like, oh man, I'm falling behind. I can't keep up. I need some time to finish this arrangement. I want to work on this song more. And I thought, well, aren't people going to feel kind of ripped off if we take a month off every now and then? And it turned out most people were like really happy to have a little bit of space in the schedule. So up until now, it's been every 6th month. So like every half a year, we would do a month off. And that may actually start putting a little more space in the schedule. But when I do take the month off from a new tune, I do what we call special topics. So this month, I did an hour live stream on playing slide in standard tuning. And then we did a whole workshop just on how to maintain repertoire, because a lot of people were learning stuff and going like, well, I've learned the new song, but now I've forgotten the old song. So how do I keep all this together? So I'll address things like that. 1 month, a bunch of people wanted to know about, well, I do sing, so how do I adapt this to singing? And so I did a whole workshop on accompaniment. And other things we've talked about, like there were a bunch of questions about chord substitutions. So I did a live stream. I did a special topic on that. So in addition to the current month's material, there's always, like at this point, there's like over a dozen other songs to work on. So if you ever are like, well, I don't really dig this month's song, or you're like, oh, it's a special topics month, but I'd like to learn a new song, you can go back and there's like tons of stuff to work on. There's also, I've always included a bunch of other sort of core material that you can go to. So besides the archive of songs and besides the archive of all the live streams, which are pretty in depth, there's also a set of core content, which is just the basic principles kind of laid out. So I think someone asked, like, does the membership include the 3 lessons I put up this week? Yes. So that material does not stay live in the wide world for very long, but it goes directly into the core content for the membership. So if you join, you've got plenty of time to sort of go through that material, and it stays up in there for as long as you're a subscriber. And then finally, there's also, I know that when I explain stuff, I often will refer to the chord tones. Like I'm like, okay, we're playing the major third, and this is the flat 7, and we're going to put an A blues scale over that dominant chord, and half the people are kind of nodding their head, and the other half are going like, we're going to do what? So there's actually like a whole set of theory lessons archived in the membership as well, which you can watch, as soon as you join, and rewatch as much as you want. So it includes all this, the monthly content, but also lots of additional songs, additional lessons, additional topics, theory, all of that stuff to go with it. So that's basically how it works. I always wanted to make sure that the price was kind of comparable to other guitar memberships you might consider. And compared to something, compared to sort of like the big behemoths in the world, there aren't going to be thousands of songs. And it's not going to be like, oh, I really want to learn that Robert Johnson song this week. Do you have it? It's like, no, I don't. For two reasons. One, everything I just explained about how I feel about working on pre-war material note for note, and the fact that there's these incredibly squirrely copyright issues with putting up famous material online. So for the time being, although that is something I'm working on, you will not find a lot of anything that's qualifies as copyright. No bueno, I can't do it. So I do a lot of work trying to find the public domain material that's been turned into popular music, but that isn't actually like owned by anybody. So that's kind of how that works. But the other thing is like everything's relative. Like if it's $20 and it's the same as another membership, then that's kind of at least an apples to apples comparison. Compared to a private lesson, it's insanely cheap, if you ask me. I mean, if you're taking a lesson every month, any good teacher I know charges at least $50 or $60 or $100 to teach. So $20 a month seems pretty reasonable. And, I like to use the banh mi index, which is if I'm going to go to the Yaya Cafe on 38th Street in Austin and get a banh mi, by the time I bought 2 banh mi's, I could have subscribed to my own membership. Now, maybe that says something about the cost of banh mi's. Maybe it says something about the cost of my membership. But it seems to me like you could do a lot of learning for the price of 2 banh mi. So that's how it works. And right now there is a registration link open at fretboardconfidential.com/register. And there's more information about the particulars of how the membership works here at that link. So you can go there to sign up if you want to, and that'll be open through next Tuesday. And you can also go back and look at the lessons again. Those lessons will be up through next Tuesday as well. The ones that are at fretboardconfidential.com/improvisation. So I see there's a few more questions up here. And so I would like to get to them and would be happy to answer them. They can be questions about the membership or about the way the teaching works or anything else like that. Will the membership? Yes. Oh, I already answered that one from Bill. Sorry. And Donald answered it too. Here's James. Okay. The forum. Yeah, I forgot to mention the forum. Oh yeah, so there's also a members forum, and it's not on Facebook. It's a private, closed forum that's only open to the membership, and so you don't need to use. It's not a Facebook group, right? So you don't have to use Facebook access to get to it. It's just a forum for everybody inside the membership, and that's where I'll post. I'll post notifications and about upcoming live streams. I'll post when then you'll get notifications as soon as the lessons go live. But it's also a place to go and hang out with other people in the membership. So people will post their work in progress. People will say, yeah, I've been working on this arrangement and here's my video of it. People are very generous about leaving comments. I've been really blown away by how sort of positive and encouraging everybody is. And the range of levels is pretty wide. There are some pretty killer musicians in there, but there's also plenty of people that are like, be nice to me. I'm just playing the fundamental version. I got my 8 bars. And, that's important too, that people are posting that, and so it gives you a place to connect with people working on the same kind of material, working on the same songs. I see a lot of back and forth about like, oh, I'm having trouble with this F chord with the thumb. Like, does anybody suggest anything? And people would chime in and say, yeah, I had that problem. I worked on it like this, and it really helped to do that. So it's nice to have a place to gather and just talk about the specific stuff that we happen to be working on. So that is, question from Lee. Do you play anything on unusual tunings apart from Open G? D, Dadgad. The only tuning that we really have used so far is drop D. And the reason for that is that open tunings are kind of like slide guitar, which is half of the people are like super excited for open tunings and the other half are just not going to touch the material unless it's in standard. And so I'm trying to present something that's relatively universal and that we can use across the board. So there were a lot of questions about slide. I wasn't going to spend a whole month on slide, but I spent a day doing a special topic, spend an hour on that. So probably do something similar with open tunings at some point and just say, hey, if open tunings are your thing, let's talk about open D in this special topic. We'll go through some of the voicings. We'll look at, here are some tunes you might want to go look at that are in open D. Here are people who like to use it. And so if you want to get used to these sounds, here's where to go. And that's probably going to be the way it is for the time being, because I love open tunings and I've played a lot in open tuning, but it really scrambles the fretboard for some people. And if you're just working on getting some of the basics together in the first place, that can really just kind of throw a wrench into things. So I try to make it, I want every month's lesson and all of the core material, I want it to be accessible to a wide range of levels. And so I try to keep it sort of tuning neutral if I can. What else? What tune are we going to work on next? Is it steady bass? Yes. So sometimes I have the coming months planned out more than others. Last season of 6 months, I knew exactly what was coming for the next 5 months. I had this whole plan. This month, I know what we're doing next month. Because I've been trying to get the rights to some new material, I've been working really hard on trying to get copyright material going. So things are still a little in flux, but I do know that starting next week, we're going to be working on a steady bass arrangement of Nobody's Fault But Mine. And you can do that tune in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different keys. We're going to probably do it in E and do it in the steady bass style. But it lends itself to a lot of cool chord substitutions. You can just play it as a vamp, right? But you could also there's different things that you could do with it. So we'll look at some of those things and take it through the full treatment. Like I said, the ultimate the idea is you take tunes and you take them through this process. The practice is to go through this process like on an ongoing basis, right? So once you've gone through a tune, you've taken a tune through this stepwise process once, then the next time it's a little bit easier because you're like, oh yeah, we're going to do that to the song. Not the exact same licks, but the same approach. And you do that a handful of times and slowly it becomes second nature to go, oh yeah, of course we're going to need an intro. Of course we're going to need a shout chorus. Of course we're going to improvise, And so the idea is you're building repertoire as you're building skills, as you're developing like a sharper, more informed sense of how all these pieces come together. Okay, well, just listen to these guys. People are posting in here about what they've gotten out of the membership. So here's Jim. The membership will give you the tools and the methodology to explore on your own too. Don't forget how to break down a tune, see where things are going within the tune, etc. Yeah. So a lot of people will be like, well, I'm doing this tune in the membership, but here's something else I'm working on. Like just this week, Rafal, who I think he's from Poland, and he was like, yeah, I got done with this tune, or I put it aside and I worked on this other thing. Here it is, and it was some cool instrumental that he was working on. And the more people do that, the happier I am. I mean, you don't have to use the forum just to post about membership material, right? You can post other stuff you're working on, and the more of that, the better. I thought that was another question. Let's see. Anything else? That's basically what I came here to talk about. So let me just kind of recap a little bit. Basically, the videos I posted this week are as good an outline as any of the kind of approach. They're long compared to what we do in the membership. I try to keep it concise. So, the first week there will be just like performance videos in tab. It'll be like, here's the fundamental version, and now here it is played slowly. And it's just 8 bars or 12 bars, right? So I'll just play it at tempo, I'll play it slowly, 2 separate videos. It's easy to find. It's easy to index. And then I'll also include, here's the embellished version, play it at tempo, play it slowly. So you've just got a couple pages of tab to look at, maybe 8 or 16 bars total. And then you've got, a few short videos to check out. And then the exercises are also, I try to keep them short. They'll be like 5 or 6 2-measure exercises. And, they'll just, they only take I'll play them and I'll do a little bit of an explanation. And then I've been doing the improvisation lessons as individual videos as well, but I've been thinking about doing them as a live stream the same way that I do the arranging. I haven't decided about that. So we'll have to see how that goes. But so I try to keep things kind of concise, and there's always tab for the main exercises are always tabbed out. There's always a visual resource. In some of the improvisation and arranging lessons, I will demonstrate more stuff than is in the tab, especially if there's questions about it. But the core idea is always there. And then there's always the video, which you can go back to again and again if you want to. Here's a question from Wim. What is the theoretical knowledge needed for the course? That's a good question. Less than you would think, just because I think there are a lot of people who don't have a ton of theory who are doing it anyway. So it doesn't matter to me. It's more your own comfort level. The reason I included a set of theory lessons in the core content is so that you can get caught up if you want to. I just think, this really just comes down to what do you think theory's for? And to me, it's a shortcut, right? It's if I learn this chord and I learn this shape, and I know that this is the 5th and the flat 7 and the 3rd, then when I'm going to improvise and I know that flat thirds to thirds sound good, then I know that this is going to work and I know why. And I also know that if I'm down here and I know this is the 3rd of A, that this is also going to sound good. So to me, knowing the shapes, knowing what intervals they represent, knowing how to get around and find different voicings based on the intervals is valuable and saves time. But it doesn't really, you can do it all just by looking at it and, checking out the tab and looking at the videos and using your ears and putting it all together. My hope is that you'll assimilate a certain amount of theory along the way just from seeing it and hearing it talked about. I don't sit down and go now we're going to play a Mixolydian flat 5 scale over this G sharp diminished, whatever. I don't usually talk like that. I try to keep things pretty pragmatic. So the comment is, my background is zero theory. Everybody says that, but I feel like there's sort of an inflated sense of what theory is. To me, knowing that this is an A is theory. Theory is just naming what stuff is. This is an A. And if you're on an A chord, this is a root. That's theory. You probably know that, right? And you probably know that this is also an A and that this is also an A. And you probably can hear that that's also the root of A. So starting from that, you can, I always just think, if you know the names of the open strings, if you can count up a couple of frets, if you know the difference between a whole step and a half step, 2 frets and 1 fret, and if you know that chords have roots and thirds and fifths, that's enough. That's enough of a lever to move the rock you want to rock, and the rock you want to move. And if you don't know those are things to really start getting caught up on. The theory lessons that I have included really start from zero. They literally just say this is the fingerboard. These are the notes. These are half steps. These are whole steps. Here's how you make a scale. Here's how you make a triad. Here's why it matters. That's pretty much it. So I don't know if any of you who are on here who have been through the membership already have gone through those theory lessons, and if you have anything to say about whether they've been helpful or whether they've helped move it forward, or whether you, or those of you who have been in the membership and don't have any theory, you can maybe let us know if that's been a hindrance or if everything's been okay. Here's a comment from Anton. You don't need much / any theory. Yeah, in the core content, I talk about music theory basics. That's correct. Thanks. So yeah, that's how it works. And if there's further questions, I will be happy to answer them. But that is what I came here to talk about. If you want to register, I will also post a link underneath the video. And so if you're watching this on replay, registration will be open through this coming Tuesday, which I think is, let's see, today's the 26th. Yeah, it's the last day of March, through the 31st, I guess. So feel free to go to the link, and there's more information about the membership if you still need it at the registration page. So /register, and that is how it works. So if you want to work on playing better fingerstyle blues, if you want to learn how to develop what you're doing, this will hopefully provide you the tools to do it. Here's a question from Craig. Do you talk about circle of fifths as a way to remember what might seem like confusing chord patterns? It doesn't super come up in blues because the chord progressions are fairly straightforward. The only time we really have to talk about moving by fifths is if a question comes up about chord substitutions, like when we're doing a blues, then sometimes we've gotten into some pretty gnarly discussions of, certain like tritone substitutions and stuff like that. But I try to keep it kind of down to earth. There's nothing, if the circle of fifths helps you to wrap your head around those things, then wonderful. For me, it's a little bit like learning the modes. There's ways to learn the modes that are helpful, and there are ways to learn the modes that are just hopelessly confusing to me. And so I really try to kind of differentiate and show the things in the most straightforward way possible. And if the circle of fifths comes up, then wonderful, but I don't sort of sit down to teach it on purpose, as an end of itself, because I don't really see where it's going. It's only a way to explain some things after the fact to me. So that's my take. But if it helps, then wonderful. And I'm happy to try to connect the dots with that if it's something that you're using to understand what's going on. From Lee. I play more in open tunings, Ry Cooder fan. Yes, who isn't? I am a huge Ry Cooder fan. This will not address that head on. I don't directly deal with that repertoire as much as I love it. Again, it's sort of a copyright thing, but there are a couple of free lessons on my channel with some tab for some Ry Cooder stuff. So I've done a bit of Crow Black Chicken, and I've done a bit of Tamp 'em Up Solid, both in dropped D. So if you want to scope those out, you can. That might be of some help. And here's a comment from Jim. I started with a little theory, but seeing the A7, E7 chord shapes up the neck, for example, was valuable to understanding some of the theory, and that's basically using just chord shapes. Yeah, I believe in just very hands-on stuff. Finding chords up and down the neck is a really good way to just for blues. It's a really good way to relate what's going on the fingerboard to the sounds that are happening. Just recognizing shapes, and I think a lot of people do that, and I certainly do for one. So yeah. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, then thank you all for being here and for talking about what's going on. If you got more questions, you can leave them in the comments. And I'll do one more stream on Sunday, just to talk about stuff more and do a little more Q&A. But here I'll go out with a little bit of Ry Cooder since we've been talking about it so much. thank you all for being here. Great to talk to you about all of this. If you got any more questions, post them. And if you want to sign up, go sign up. And I'll see you soon.